All right, hi guys. We are back to our read aloud since we are back from spring break. I hope you at least were able to enjoy yourselves at home with your families during that time. Okay, we're gonna pick up where we left off. I believe we are on chapter 35. So this one is called The Latest Casualty. All right. I was in my room that night planning my escape to the Cameron Village Library, from the mixed up files style, when I heard something about Shelbourne Elementary on the television in the living room. It was late. The new glow-in-the-dark alarm clock I'd gotten for my birthday said it was 11:10 p.m., and Alexis was already asleep across the room. I slipped out of bed and tiptoed down the hall to peek in at the TV. They were showing pictures of my school while a woman explained all about the banned books locker library. They even showed a picture of me from last year's yearbook. I squeaked but covered my mouth enough that Mom and Dad didn't hear me. On the couch, I saw my mom put her hand to her forehead like she had a headache. Mrs. Spencer came on then. "Fourth graders aren't old enough to make decisions like this for themselves," she said. "That's why they have parents. That's why we have a school board. The school board agreed that these books were inappropriate for elementary school students, in many cases harmful. The books were removed from the library for their protection." The reporter talked about how this all began with the school board meeting where Mrs. Spencer got them to remove the books, and then a picture of Mrs. Jones came on the screen. At the center of the controversy is Shelbourne Elementary librarian Dr. Opal Jones, who all along has maintained that the books should remain available to all students. Mrs. Jones, decked out in a blue dress with white polka dots, appeared in a recorded interview. "Every parent has the right to decide what their child can and can't read. What they cannot do is make that decision for everyone else," she said. It was the same thing she'd said at the school board meeting. Tonight, Mrs. Jones became the latest casualty in what observers are calling the Battle of the Books, the reporter said. The reporter cut to a man in a suit. Under his name, it said he was a member of the school board. Whether deliberately or through negligence, Dr. Jones let those books circulate against the express orders of the school board. As such, her contract has been terminated. Her contract has been terminated? That meant fired. Mrs. Jones had been fired, and it was all because of me. Okay, next chapter. My glorious return. Dad drove me to school my first day back from suspension so I wouldn't have to ride the bus. I didn't want to have to sit there while Rebecca and Danny pretended not to know me. They probably still liked me, but now I was the girl who got everybody in trouble. They couldn't hang out with me anymore, or everybody would hate them too. I didn't blame them, but I just couldn't bear it. Not on my first day back. Dad knew I was scared to go back. He didn't even tell me not to suck on my braids. I don't know if he did it on purpose or not, but he dropped me off with a kiss right as the first bell rang, so everyone was already in class when I walked down the hall. I was going to get a tardy slip, but I wasn't too worried about it. Not like I would have been before. I wasn't the good girl anymore. I had just been suspended for 3 days. Being on time for class didn't really seem all that important anymore. I was glad nobody was there when I got to my locker. Every day I went straight to my locker and put in the combination on my lock to open it. But the lock was gone, of course. Mr. Crutchfield had cut it off. Suddenly it was 3 days ago, and I was standing exactly where I was now, and I was watching Principal Banazuski open my locker and pull out all the banned books, and I was crying in front of everyone. I started to cry again now, but not as bad. Just a tear or two. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. I was going to have to open my locker again, put my books in, and get to class. At least now it would be empty, and I could put all my school books in there without having to lug them around. But it wasn't empty. When I opened my locker, folded notes spilled out of it onto the floor. Dozens of them. My locker mailbox had been stuffed full, and when more notes wouldn't fit, they'd piled up inside my locker. I opened one with pink loopy handwriting. "AA, I'm sorry you got suspended. Hang in there." Signed, Jana. Another one said, "Dear Amy Ann, my parents got a letter telling them I checked out a book from the BBLL, but they didn't care. It stinks that you got suspended. Principal Banana is a doofus." Signed, Kevin. They were all like that. Fourth graders writing to tell me they were sorry I got suspended, that Principal Banazuski and the school board were wrong, that their parents had gotten the letter Principal Banazuski said she would write, but either their parents didn't care or they didn't care that their parents were upset. I sat on the floor and opened every one. I cried again as I read them, but this time I wasn't crying because I was sad. I was crying because everybody was being so nice. I stuffed all the letters into my locker with my books, dried my eyes, and opened the door to Mr. Vaughn's classroom. Mr. Vaughn was in the middle of reading out a new list of vocabulary words when every head in the room turned and saw me. Rebecca squealed, jumped up, and ran across the room to hug me. Danny came over too, but just stood nearby smiling at me. Everybody else broke out cheering and clapping. Everybody but Trey. I was stunned by my class's response. I was sure everyone was going to hate me. I tried to call, but your mom said you were grounded, Rebecca said. Did you see all the notes? Danny said. I told everyone the truth about why you got suspended. I didn't have a chance to answer them. Mr. Vaughn quieted everyone down and sent us to our seats. All right, he said. Welcome back, Amy Ann. As you can see, you were missed by everyone, including me. Now, if we can try to focus on our new vocabulary list. The next word is valiant. As soon as we got to a time when we could all get up and move around, Rebecca and Danny and a few of the other students hurried over to me. I worried that Mr. Vaughn was going to make us be quiet and separate us, but he pretended to be focused on something at his desk and not notice. I saw your picture on the news, Danny said, flicking his hair out of his face. Did you hear? Mrs. Jones was fired, Rebecca said. I know, I said. It still hurt to think about it. Did you guys get in trouble? Nah, Danny said. I mean, we got the letter home like everybody else, but that's it. There's going to be a special school board meeting, someone else said. My mom said I can go. Me too, some of the others added. What are we going to do now? Danny asked me. What do you mean? I asked. What's next? Rebecca said. How do we get Mrs. Jones and all the books back? Get Mrs. Jones and the books back? How is that even possible? And how on earth did they think I would know the answer? It was over. The BBLL was finished, and so was I. But I didn't say that. All I said was, I don't know. Well, just wait till Helen comes, Danny said. Then they'll be sorry. We don't have to wait till Helen comes, Rebecca said. We've got Amy Ann. Mr. Vaughn coughed, which told us it was time to get back to doing some real work. Rebecca and Danny smiled at me as they left, which made me feel even worse. What was everybody going to think of me when they realized there was nothing I could do, that there was nothing any of us could do to fix everything? I looked up and saw Trey watching me from across the room. My fists clenched and my face got hot. In the 3 days since I'd been suspended, I'd felt sad, then sorry, then hopeless, then depressed. But now I was just mad, and I was starting to think that giving Trey a big old knuckle sandwich might just be worth another 3 days of suspension. It's not a good idea. All right, we're going to read one more today. It's called The Mirror Universe. I was marching across the cafeteria to give Trey a piece of my mind, and maybe a piece of my fist, when Jeffrey Gonzalez appeared in front of me like somebody transporting in one of those science fiction shows he watched. I almost knocked him over. Hey, Amy Ann, he said. Hey, Jeffrey, I said. Excuse me, I need to go punch somebody in the face. Jeffrey looked nervously behind him, wondering who I was talking about. Oh, okay, he said. I just wanted to say I was sorry. You know, for getting you suspended. I stopped. What? I'm sorry I got you suspended, Jeffrey said. He looked a little worried I was going to punch him instead. How did you get me suspended? I asked. It was that book you gave me, Bridge to Terabithia. I read it, and it made me think about my grandmother, who died. When I finished it, I got really upset. My heart sank. I felt terrible. I hadn't meant for Bridge to Terabithia to make Jeffrey feel bad. I had thought that maybe reading about somebody else who lost someone suddenly would make him understand he wasn't alone. Maybe show him there was a way out of the sadness. No, not like that, he said, seeing the worry on my face. I mean, it made me cry. Jeffrey looked around, embarrassed. And I couldn't stop crying. That's when Mom and Dad came in my room, and I kind of let it all out. I hadn't really cried since Grammy died. I guess I needed to. Anyway, Mom and Dad saw it was the book that did it, so they called the principal. But not because they were mad. They called to say how great it was that Mrs. Jones gave me the book. I saw it all in my head. Jeffrey's parents called to tell Principal Banazuski how Mrs. Jones helped Jeffrey by giving him the right book. Oh, how wonderful. Mrs. Banazuski says, "What book?" "Bridge to Terabithia," they say. Alarm bells go off for Principal Banazuski. She's heard of that book. It was on the banned books list. She goes to Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones says she never gave anybody that book. It's right back here on the shelf. Only it isn't. But then, where did Jeffrey get it? "They made me tell," Jeffrey said. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to get you in trouble, and neither did my parents. They're really sorry, too. They said they would call your parents and let them know." I looked at Trey across the room, drawing in his sketchbook. A minute ago, I was ready to kill him for ratting me out, but it turned out he didn't have anything to do with it after all. "It's okay," I told Jeffrey. "I'm just glad you feel better. You got really mean there for a little while." "I know," Jeffrey said. "That was the mirror universe me." "The mirror universe you?" "Yeah," he said. "In Star Trek, there's this mirror universe, and everybody there is the opposite of what they are in this universe. So if you're good here, you're bad there. The mirror universe Jeffrey took over for a little while, but Jeffrey Prime is back now." He was losing me. "Well, whoever you are now, I'm glad you're back." Jeffrey smiled and saluted me with his fingers in a V shape. "Live long and prosper," he told me. "You too," I said. Instead of marching across to Trey, I went and stood in the cafeteria line thinking about the mirror universe Amy Ann. Which one was the good one? And which one was the bad one? The Amy Ann who never spoke up and never got into trouble? Or the Amy Ann who refused to accept a bad decision by the school board and did something good about it? All right, we'll stop there. And then tomorrow, we'll start with this chapter, The Biggest Idea.